Hello Provo, I'm Eric W. Speckhard and I'm running for mayor of Provo. I'm thrilled with the opportunity to be on this video and let you see into my private life and what has really determined my viewpoints on a number of issues. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. I have an identical twin brother and two older sisters. My parents are both deceased. I joined the LDS Church when I was 17 with my twin brother and went on a mission. After my mission, I came up from Texas to go to school at BYU University. While I was at BYU, I got my degree in international relations and I also started a business. I've been self-employed for 30 years and my wife and I have run our business. It's a t-shirt business and we sell flags and graduation stoles and sashes, but I know what it's like to meet a budget and to understand the importance of staying on budget. I have 5 children. My oldest is a daughter. She's married. We have 2 grandchildren in downtown New York City. My next son has graduated and lives in Salt Lake City, and he works for Goldman Sachs. My son-in-law in New York works for Goldman Sachs. My third son is a student at Utah State University. He's a junior. My fourth son just graduated, or my fourth child just graduated from Provo High School and just got his mission call. He'll be going to Spokane, Washington at the end of July. And our youngest child, my daughter, she is a junior at Provo High School this upcoming year. And that's my family. As far as what I've done in my business and stuff, it comes down to service in the community and different things. Probably one of the larger things that I co-founded with one of my friends was the Temple to Temple July 24th run. This year will be the 5th year. We started it 5 years ago at the Provo, Utah South Stake. And last year we had 17,000 people. And it's from the Provo Temple to the Provo City Center Temple. It's free. It's on July 24th. But it's just a community event to come out and participate as family and friends. I've also, as a service, I'm on a board with the nurse practitioners. They go around and help first-time mothers. Some are married, some are not married. And then I've had the opportunity, I've lived in South Franklin neighborhood for 25 years. And I've had the opportunity to do a lot of church service. I've been in the bishopric or bishop for about 22 years, and that's given me the opportunity to serve people. So it's been a real opportunity for me and my family. I think one of the big parking issues right now that just came up in the last week is the lawsuit that the county has filed against Provo City for not building the parking garage that the city had said they would build. The city is saying that they do have subsequent parking areas for pedestrians, and so they feel that they've met their obligation. I think the real problem there is that there was legal documents that said that they would build a parking garage. And now that property has been sold, and so that opportunity does not exist. Also, as the city of Provo has continued to grow, most of us that have been here over 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years are used to just being able to pull right in front of a store. And with the population increase, that's just not available. We do have parking facilities around the city, but I think we need to get the information out to where those parking facilities are and recognize that we are going to have to walk a block or two to get to some of the downtown areas. I also think in transportation a huge issue is BRT. It was passed. Most citizens feel like there was no discussion on it and it was just kind of forced down their throats. Whether you're for it or against it, BRT is here to stay. And so as mayor, I think we really need to focus on how we're going to maximize the BRT situation and try and get more people to ride the buses and to use those facilities. Some people will want to, some people absolutely won't. But I think there's a percentage of people that if we help show the benefits, that they'll at least try out the BRT system. And I think that's a huge opportunity for the citizens of Provo. I think the parking for the residents in different areas of Provo is a huge problem. I know that this morning, in fact, on 5th West down in my neighborhood, they're putting in a turn lane, and so they've told the homeowners on 5th West down across the railroad tracks that there's no street side parking anymore, that they'll have to park all of their vehicles in their driveway. That's a huge problem for some of these older homes that have tiny, tiny little driveways. And there again, I just think that it should have been talked about much more before it was done. I think one of the biggest economic roadblocks that we have in Provo is you have several cities, including Provo, that are trying to invite in big box stores and small businesses, and yet the incentives that it takes to get some of these bigger retailers or movie theaters, they want so much as an incentive that we really need the data to see if it's worthwhile. And Provo has really done a good job of evaluating each situation and saying, it really doesn't make sense to give this much of a tax incentive to have someone come in, because it would take 5, 10, 20 years to recoup that incentive. Well, on a lot of situations, and even in the big box retailers, how many of them are closing? There's no guarantee that after you've given all these incentives that they're going to be around. Look at Nordstrom at the University Mall. They were given incentives, and then the recession came. But they pulled out after I believe it was 10 years, after, the incentives to be there were there. And so they're gone. So we really need to crunch the numbers and make sure. And once we do make sure, people always ask, well, why did this city get this store and why didn't we? I think we need to do a much better job of explaining, hey, we weren't willing as a city to give this much as a tax incentive or any other incentives that we do because it didn't make fiscal sense. And so we really need to look at that. Well, I've had the opportunity of meeting with several people in Provo city government, including the mayor. And there's lots of new projects that are coming on. The mall in East Bay has new owners, and they've got several new projects that they're working on to bring companies into the mall and try to make that growth happen. But I think there again, it comes down to getting the data. And do we really I would love to have a super Target down in the west part of town. For grocery shopping, there's not a whole lot in the west. And so it would be fabulous. But we have to have the infrastructure, and we also have to see eventually, as that area continues to grow, I think more businesses will want to be there. And then we have to see what tax incentives we're going to give, because to me it makes no fiscal sense to sit there and give all these incentives and then say, well, they're bringing in all these jobs, but if we don't have the stores where the people can spend their money in Provo, then our tax revenue doesn't increase. So they're all going to, Lehigh or Orem or Spanish or Payson or wherever they're going to go to all the new shops that are popping up. And so we need to really look at it. And our tax base is actually doing okay. It obviously can do better. It is absolutely vital. And in that area, John Curtis has done a phenomenal job with his team on getting involved in the social media. Not only are the younger, the millennials, and even the teenagers, that is how they run their lives, but older folks, I'm thrilled that I can do FaceTime Live and see my grandchildren in New York. I also remember when DVDs came out, and my kids laugh about it still today when we watched a movie and I told my kid to rewind the DVD. And they said, "Dad, you don't rewind DVDs." Social media and all of the electronical information that we can get is huge to disseminate information. And so I think we definitely need to move in that direction, because he has done a fabulous job of making social media there and a huge presence. And most people are getting more and more involved on social media, meaning the grandparents, because it's a way to communicate with their children and grandchildren. So I see it as a plus. I think we could have a class. We could have volunteers go out and show people that are interested on how to do Facebook or how to do any of this social media. There's plenty of volunteers that would do it. We just need to organize it. Well, the growth in Utah has been phenomenal. In fact, last year, as far as a percentage of population increase, Utah was #1 in the nation. And Provo and Utah County was leading that growth. I think one of the problems we have is we need to address the number of apartments and condos. Now, there's various reasons for that. The millennials, the 20 and 30-year-olds, they, unlike most of us that are older, they plan to move several times throughout their lives. And so a lot of them aren't interested in owning a home. They also, in a lot of homes, both parents work. Or if you're a single parent, you're working. And so they don't have time to take care of the home and the flower beds and, plant a garden. And so we've got tremendous growth in the apartments and condos. It also takes more and more income to afford a apartment or a condo or a home. And so we really need to be careful on how we continue the growth. In Provo, for example, on University, there's the apartment complex that's 200 units. There's also slated to begin next year, right by Frontrunner, Cowboys Unlimited, or Cowboys Limited, is proposing a 500-unit apartment complex right there by Frontrunner. And there's other, you've seen on Center Street, the apartments that have been built. So we've got a lot of growth. We need to make sure that we're not just doing one-bedroom apartments, because there's a tremendous need for 2, 3, and 4-bedroom apartments for families. And the affordability is a real issue too. Unfortunately, when we say affordability, we're not always in a position. Everyone would like to live in a really nice neighborhood or a really nice house or an apartment or a condo. But there's also free market involved. You can't have everything. I remember when we first got married 28 years ago, we lived in a tiny little apartment because that's what we could afford. And so it really depends on how much the local government and the federal government in subsidizing these homes and apartments can make things affordable. But in some areas, people choose to live where they live for a variety of reasons, for schools, for quality of life. And so I think we need to, as a city, really look at that and say, what do we want? How much growth do we want? I do not want to live in downtown New York City. I am so grateful that my daughter and son-in-law want to, but I don't want to. And so how big do we really want Provo to get? It's a huge question. The transient homeless situation in Provo has grown exponentially over the last several years. It has affected me in a very personal way. I live, like I said, in the South Franklin neighborhood. I've been in the bishopric for over 20 years. I have dealt with folks that are trying to do their best, have not been given a lot of the opportunities that we have been given growing up. A stable environment, an education, and therefore it creates a really tough situation for many of these individuals. I would think that in our city of Provo, we have so many volunteers, so many wonderful members of the community that want to do good things but don't know where to go. They don't know that they can volunteer at the Food and Care Coalition or the food bank. They don't know that they can do service projects with the city, whether it's pulling up flowers down Center Street or different areas. I think getting the information out, you can volunteer in a ton of different areas. As far as what can we really do for the transient and homeless, one thing that I would plead for the generous citizens of Provo not to do, please do not give any cash or food to anyone that is sitting or by a store or sitting on a street corner. When you do that, you just increase the likelihood that more people will come. And because of our generosity in Provo, that has happened. We have the food bank and the Food and Care Coalition and other social networks set up to help these individuals. We have the Transient Service Office at Deseret Industry that the LDS Church runs. There are plenty of facilities that will help these individuals, and if they go to these institutions, they will get help. When you give $3 or $5 or a couple cans of food to someone, your money is not stretched nearly as far as if you gave $5 to the Food and Care Coalition. They can stretch those dollars. They can make that work. We also need to let people know that there's service opportunities. When I was bishop 10 years ago, I had 12 couples in my ward that were service missionaries. They were called for 18 months. Several of the couples are now in their 9th and 10th year of serving because it gives them the opportunity to serve people. And Provo is really good at that. I think that having the millennials and the 20, 30-something-year-olds involved and really making Provo City more vibrant than it's ever been, at least in the last 30 years since I've been here, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. At the same time, how big do you want it? Do you want 8-story apartment complexes? Because we could fill them. And there's people on the other side that are like, well, I don't even go to Provo anymore because the restaurants are all full. And it's such a tough situation. How big do you want it? And the citizens need to decide. How big do you want it? The rooftop series is awesome. And he has done a phenomenal job of getting people involved. I would say on that, and I mentioned to do it before. So out of anything that they leave in this YouTube video, I would say this. 2 months ago, I went to one of my friends that I knew who's just got his MPA, Masters of Public Administration from BYU. He talked to several of his friends, and I had a meeting with 5 or 6 BYU graduates. My campaign manager, Makeda, I didn't know 2 months ago. She's a young, intelligent, married woman that has her MPA, has her law degree, is going to Columbia for a PhD. If we can get more people like Makeda involved in city politics as well as national politics, that's what it's all about. We don't want just a small group of people doing it. And so for me, it's been a success already to get younger people involved in the campaign and get their ideas and their feedback, because that's what it takes. It takes getting people involved to come up with solutions, because I'm the first person that will tell you I don't have answers to every problem. I never will. But I will certainly listen to you, and I'm telling you that we have enough people in this city that we can solve any problem. Period. Everyone is talking about the development of the west side of Provo. Provo City is landlocked. We can only go in certain directions, and most of those directions are full. The west side is not. But it creates a unique opportunity. But I think first and foremost, when people say, hey, we need to really build out the west side, we also need to talk to the landowners. that own that property. There are several families that have farmed for over 80 years this property. And so I think Provo can have plans, but we really need to talk to these landowners and see what they would like to do and get them involved. Provo has done some of that, but I think we need to have way more discussions. There's some people that don't want single-family homes on the west side, and there's some people that don't want apartments on the west side, and some people that want mixed housing so that you have the condos and the homes and some apartments. And I think that if you can set it up, there are many advantages to having some mixed housing so that you get younger families that are starting out that can't afford a home. But I don't think if we have huge apartment complexes, it makes it so much more difficult to provide a good community life as far as what do you really want. And so if you just have a ton of apartments and no homes, it complicates it. If you just have homes, there are areas where whoever buys the property, these home builders will be able, and it'll depend on the ordinances, but there are some people that do just want neighborhoods. I grew up in a neighborhood in Houston. We had very few apartments. We had some, but it was a great place to be raised because the homeowners tend to stay in their homes longer than apartment owners and condo owners, because as families change or jobs change, they leave more frequently than the homeowners. Now that has changed since I was a little boy, that homeowners are getting new jobs and moving. But I really think that the West Side has tremendous opportunity. But I think ultimately it is continuing to talk to the landowners and see what they would like to do. So I know Provo City has a master plan, but I don't think it's going to move as fast as some people want. And I don't think it should. I don't think the city can impose on landowners what they have to do with their property. It's their property. The airport is a really wonderful opportunity. We have Duncan Aviation that's moving in. That's going to be a huge job creator for the city of Provo. We do have a Legionnaire. I actually flew on Frontier when Frontier Airlines was there. And I think there's potential to get more flights at the same time. You're talking about spending millions and millions of dollars for a new terminal or to add new terminals. And how many people are actually going to use that? If we hope to have a new terminal so that we have more airlines come, we hope they'll come, but there's no guarantee. And there's no guarantee an airline can decide, hey, you know what, we just haven't had the traffic on the passenger traffic to warrant being here, and we're pulling out. There's nothing Provo can do if an airline decides to pull out. So it all has to do with economic, data. And so we have to have the data, and it's kind of, the chicken before the egg. If you don't build a new terminal, the airlines don't come. If you build a new terminal, they might come. So is it worth spending millions of dollars for that opportunity? And how many of our citizens, and the data will prove this out, how many of our citizens would be able to use the flights? Because for the vast majority, they are never going to be able to go to Provo and fly directly to London or Tokyo. It's not going to happen. And so you'll have people that are flying more locally, obviously in the United States, but even more locally than that. They might just be going to California. They might just be going, to Denver or Texas, or, they might have a few flights to Florida. But the data will prove how many flights and how many people would use that airport. Because if we're only going to have a couple thousand people that could use it, yes, it's convenient. But is it worth spending millions of dollars to do that? That's a huge question. Is it worth spending the money? Zoning compliance is a huge issue, and there's several different issues that are affecting the city of Provo. One of the big issues with the zoning compliance is the homes that are right off of BYU University, where there's more people living in homes than city ordinances allow. First and foremost, I think we need to make sure that all of the homeowners actually know what the city ordinances are. I think most of them do, but there's some that don't. I think we need to look at that for some of these homeowners, they've owned the homes for years and years and years and have used it as an income source. And so to change their income source, we need to really look at that and say, hey, if you had 2 or 3 students, or you had 5 students, and now we're telling you you can only have 3 students because there's not enough parking, and that obviously affects the parking around BYU and around Provo. But we need to also, on the ordinances, the fines that the city imposes on city ordinances, I don't know what those numbers are for sure. I had one person tell me, hey, the fines for having too many students is so low that one owner just considers it cost of doing business. If I can bring in X amount of dollars by having a student live here and the city's going to fine me $25 or $50 or $100, I'll pay the $50 or $100 and I'll keep renting to that additional student. I mean, we need to look at that, and it needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis as far as which homes, the licensing that they've done to have renters. I get that the city needs information, but all these fees, all these licenses, either for how many people you have living with you, or do you have a license for your dog and your cat, and do you have a license for this? It generates some income, but at the same time, particularly on the student housing, if you don't think that the owners are passing along any increase in fees, in taxes, I think you're wrong. They're going to pass that along, and so therefore the rents continue to go up. I had the opportunity this past week to talk to one of the employees in the city about a new city hall. And he said, right now we're in, part of the building is earthquake proof, part of the building is not. He said it's not like so unsafe that it poses a danger to anyone, but, we'd like to make it a safer place. Well, I'd like to make all the homes in Provo safer, but it all takes money. They're saying that a new city center would cost tens of millions of dollars. At the present time, we don't have that kind of money. And I am not for spending millions and millions of dollars or bonding millions and millions of dollars to create a new city center. I think we can look at it and they're kind of making it work right now. And I think we need to sit there and say, hey, we need to start setting aside and putting some money together. And just like all of us as citizens do, we have to stay in our budgets. And I think the city needs to stay within a budget, and we need to have ideas that we'd like to do. But I would not be for spending the millions of dollars for a new city center at the present time. Until I see the actual data, numbers don't lie. If we can't afford, which I don't think we can right now, I think there's more pressing issues for the city of Provo than building a new city center. My vision for the city is to have way more inclusion and cooperation from the citizens of Provo. After this last national election, I would say 90% of my friends have said, politics stinks. I'm not interested in doing anything. And when we get a very small group of people that are making all the rules, laws, ordinances, it can create serious problems as far as I'm concerned. So inclusion is huge. Transparency, every political candidate talks about transparency, and I don't think any of us do as much as we need to do. It needs to be open for discussion on whatever we're talking about so that citizens can get involved instead of 2 or 3 months down the road when some ordinance has been passed and then everyone's mad about it. I also think cooperation. We cannot, as a city, dig our heels in and say, unless we do this, I'm not doing a thing. There has to be some give and take. And I think that one of my strong suits is bringing people to the table and having discussions, having heated discussions. But at the end of the day, saying, this data supports that this would be best for all of Provo, not just for this little group that wants this or that little group that wants something else. And so my vision is to have more people involved, not so much in just the politics, but in your neighborhoods. I've gone to neighborhood meetings. I've gone to neighborhood meetings that have 6 people show up for a neighborhood meeting. Last night I was at a neighborhood meeting that had over 70 because there's a real issue that they're wanting to know about, and they didn't know about it until the last second. And I think it's important that we just include. The more people we include, and finally I would say my vision is to get the great citizens of Provo to continue to serve in whatever area you're serving in. My sons and my daughter served on their sororities and fraternities when they were at Utah State University. We have all kinds of organizations that need your help. And one of the issues that I would really like to bring to the forefront is to have information where these individuals and these couples and families can go, and I think the city's starting to do that, but have all of the opportunities for service. Put on the city webpage, and hey, we need some help for someone that'll go to a school and do a reading class. There's tons of people that would do it if they knew which school to go to or what time to go to. And so I think we need to desperately get that information out because Provo is willing to help and Provo is willing to serve. The question on why I'm the best candidate, I think it comes down to I have had the opportunity to serve most of my service, not all of my service. I'm the chaplain with the Troop 51, the community troop here at the Elks. My wife and I have been involved with that troop for close to 10 years. Troop 51 was almost gone 10 years ago. There was like one boy left. There were 5 or 6 families that got together. At the end of this month, they'll have 27 boys and I think 13 to 15 leaders going. Service is what it's all about. My grandfather, like I mentioned, if I hadn't, and my great-grandfather, all the way back to Martin Luther, Lutheran ministers. It has been ingrained in our family and in my life that service is what your life is all about. There's a quote that I had on my mission. I don't know for sure if it was President Kimball. I think it was. But for me, I kept it on my mission, and I've kept it with me. And President Kimball said, "My life is like my shoes, to be worn out in the service of others." For me, it's all about bringing every single person to the table and making sure that every single person knows they count. On the transient and homelessness, I've had a good friend who lost his apartment. He's in his 60s now. He lived under the roof of my building for 4 months in January, February, March, and April. And we had a little couch for him with a heater. I've driven another gentleman up to the Y where he lived in a tent. Those very personal experiences have made a huge impact on my life. I will work harder than anyone else because I think it's so vitally important that we make Provo as good as we can, and that comes from getting everyone involved, in cooperating with each other, in being transparent, and at the end of the day, as individuals and as a community saying, I have done all that I can do to make this place a better place. I am LDS, but I also have most of my family is not LDS. And so I know what it's like to, on the other side of the fence. My dad was very successful in the oil business. He was also an alcoholic. After my mother died, my mom died when I was 2.5. That had a huge impact on my father.
And you?
And he was the one that would come home and sit in his chair after work and drink. So it wasn't like he was violent or anything. It was a very sad time for my father. And I've got a sister that has been in AA for 35 years, left home when she was 15 or 16, and she now has her doctorate degree. She's a therapist. She's doing fantastic. But I've had situations that have allowed me the opportunity to see on a very personal basis, not only in my church service, but in my own family, that everyone wants to be noticed, wants to be loved, wants to be important. And making someone feel important is easy to do. It's as easy as saying hello. It's as easy as sending a text message. I think that for me is a vital part of what drives me to serve people, because I had tons of families growing up. Moms that would let me come over to their home after school, because I had a stepmother and it wasn't a really good situation. On Mother's Day, I have called one lady every Mother's Day. I called her this past Mother's Day. And I've called her around the country because they've moved to thank her for spending time with me. And I think the citizens of Provo would spend the time if they know how and where to spend it. And that's where money does not create changes. Our government, federal government and state government spend millions and billions of dollars, and it makes no change. Most change happens on a one-on-one situation. And so for me, it's trying to get people to be inclusive and to make a difference. We're fortunate to live in this city, very fortunate to live in the city. And for me, it's about making a difference in people's lives. And at the end of the day, and I think a lot of it has to do with the older you get, and if you do have grandchildren, all of a sudden you want it to be a little better for them. And I'm not just talking about financially. I'm talking you want it to be a better community, a better life for your children, grandchildren, your neighbors. And when I say, Eric for Provo, it's about you, I honestly mean that it is about you. If you have any questions, please go to our website, ericforprovo.org. Ask a question, you'll get an answer.